Well, hello, and welcome to another Shrink Wrap book review. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan Lee, a quadruple board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist and an alien of extraordinary ability living here in the States after traveling here from my faraway homeland of Canada. Well, on this sub-portion of my channel, I review a lot of the literature that patients, colleagues, friends, family have recommended to me that I often end up recommending to people that I see in my daily practice as well. And if you ever have any suggestions for books that you'd like to see reviewed, by all means, please drop me a line in the comment section. I'd love to find some new material. Always trying to read at the gym, while on the treadmill, sitting on my bike, and all of that. Well, today's review comes from a somewhat old book at this point in time, and it is Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote for Chaos. Now, Jordan Peterson is, a psychology professor previously at the University of Toronto and before that at Harvard. He did all of his training, I believe, in Canada at the University of McGill, and has been somewhat of a controversial figure, at least in the last few years that I've known about him. I was somewhat reluctant, to be honest, to review this book because from what I heard of Dr. Peterson's public persona and the very minute snippets of interviews and debates that he had been engaged in, I found him somewhat abrasive. Well, for whatever reason, one weeknight not too long ago, I was in my local Barnes& and Nobles and pursuing some of the titles, and I saw this book from, yesteryear, and it brought me back to thinking about my hometown of Toronto, Ontario, and of course, my alma mater, the University of Toronto, where I did my undergrad and also my residency training as a shrink. And I decided to take the plunge and pick up Dr. Peterson's book, and I'm actually quite glad I did. In contrast to Dr. Peterson's public persona and some of the snippets that I've, secondhand or firsthand watched on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, I found Dr. Peterson to be incredibly grounded, realistic, and evidence-based in what he was saying. The title sort of sums it all up, 12 Rules for Life. He sort of breaks down, what he would relay to a young Padawan or an old Padawan, the kinds of themes and, philosophies and discussions that he tends to experience in his clinical practice, because he's one of the few, according to him, PhD professors in clinical psychology who continue to maintain a clinical practice or an office-based practice. What I love about this book is just that Dr. Peterson seems to have a knack for distilling incredibly abstruse and abstract knowledge into truly digestible and comprehensible language. I cannot tell you how many psychoanalytic Jungian theorists and papers I've read where I'm just like, what the but Dr. Peterson seems to really have that knack as a teacher, as a writer, to make sense of what often seems like chaotic mumbo-jumbo. And in fact, the subtitle of his book, An Antidote to Chaos, really sums up the approach that he's taken in highlighting the difference between sort of generativity and creativity and stability and the chaos that tends to characterize human life in all its mortality, fragility, and its instability. Although time doesn't permit me to summarize all 12 rules, there are a couple that did stand out to me when I read them on first pass, one of which is, of course, make friends with people who want the best for you. Dr. Peterson highlights what I often see in my clinical practice as well, where individuals genuinely, or state genuinely, that they want to change, they want to improve their lives for the better, but they tend to bring along an entourage or occupy a space with people who seem to reify and reflect back to them the worst parts of themselves. And he talks about the healthiness of choosing and selecting those friendships that provide that reciprocal engagement and reinforcement and encouragement. Those friends, those partners, those mentors who will thrive as they see us thriving and who are vested in our thriving as well. And he goes as far as to say there is a moral element to this. In fact, it is not amoral or undesirable for you to leave behind some of the, quote, friendships or relationships that, cause you to really lose your mind or be completely unstable, keep you up at night, for your own benefit, and to ally yourself with those people who in their own personal walks are genuinely trying to make the world a better place and will support you in your own efforts to do the same. He also gives this axiomatic expression of set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. He talks a lot about how people justify their own passivity or inefficiency or their lack of accountability or responsibility by blaming things outside of themselves, their abusive parents or relationships, socialism or democracy or totalitarianism, racism, discrimination, without actually sort of looking within and looking at their own individual houses, how they choose to comport themselves, how they choose to live and take responsibility. In fact, he argues that in any kind of situation, we have that choice to cultivate the vengeful resentment that says, I'm this way because the world is cruel, or to view cruelty and suffering as endemic to the human experience and to do something about it, starting with ourselves. In many ways, it is, Michael Jackson's I'm talking to the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And figuring out what that looks like. And he recounts tales of individuals who have come from seemingly shockingly horrifying backgrounds and family lives, but have yet vowed to do the impossible, to live different and to not transmit those kinds of toxic patterns and dynamics to the next generation. In short, it is in taking hold of our responsibility and our own selves, our house, so to speak, that is the kernel on which our hope can be based. Perhaps the most memorable of his axioms to me was this next one, Rule 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And he talks about how certain individuals, I'm sure we all know some of these people, live in their own delusional fantasy world where because they've spoken something out loud or told a lie, it must somehow be true because that's how they see the world and that's how the world is. And he talks about how it is so vital and important to have that childlike curiosity, humility, openness to other people's experiences, to recognize that we are not, in the end, the be-all and end-all, the only person that we answer to. But in our numerous daily, banal, mundane things that we tell ourselves and each other, we set a course and a trajectory for ourselves that can end very, very differently. The person with a personality disorder that allows them to act without impunity, morally, ethically, conscience-wise, and can lie to themselves that they truly are a good person while simultaneously harassing, controlling and manipulating the situation with their choice of words. I mean, in many ways, it's almost like sorcery or witchcraft, although the DSM would just, easily surmise it as being narcissistic personality disorder or sociopathy. The aspect of controlling the narrative or speaking into being what actually isn't true at all. And he talks about how wisdom truly is being able to recognize reality as it is, to accept it as it is, and to have the humility and the openness to be challenged and even refute some of the things that we take for granted. All in all, I have to say, in reading this book in its entirety, I was honestly surprised as the words of this individual seem in somewhat of a contrast or contradiction to what I have heard and what I have been told about this individual. And in many ways, I think it is a lesson, an object lesson, or a metaphor for real life as well. This is not, conspiracy theories. Don't buy the man or what they say. I think we are each entitled to view people and to view reality in our own subjective viewpoint. That being said, I think for me at least, having read what Dr. Peterson has written, I have a very different view of who this person is, apart from some of the more flagrant and controversial topics that he has taken on, oftentimes with very little affect or even somewhat of a proud and dismissive or withering kind of look on his face, which I don't care too much for. Whatever your opinions on Dr. Peterson as a public persona or figure, whatever your opinions are of people in your vicinity or around you, I would encourage you to do the deep work of reflection, observation, mindful attention to what it is that you are experiencing both internally and in the external world, to come to your own conclusions about people around you, to decide, to choose how you would like to live your life, as we only have one, and to proceed with the hope and the faith that there are ways to live, to push back the chaos and the enmity that we can often experience by default as human people, and to cultivate a sense of equanimity and tranquility in a chaotic world. If you like this content and other things you've viewed on my channel, please feel free to leave me a comment, a like, or a subscribe, and any opinions you might have, reflections on your own mental health journeys, things that have been encouraging, uplifting, and edifying for you. So until next time, happy reading, and love yourself and love each other.